And on that note, Dr. Hakin, it is a real pleasure to be speaking with you today. As those of you who have been watching the Pursuit of Motion podcast know, every episode is a special one, but this is one where I really have the honor of getting some insights from someone who is magnanimous with University in Nova Scotia. So, Dr. Hakin, it's a pleasure to speak with you.
It's a pleasure to be with you, and just call me Andy in this one. That's everybody refers to me as Andy, and thank you for doing this. It's greatly appreciated.
My pleasure. My pleasure. So, what got you into academia in the first place, sir?
Yeah, it's a great question. Like most people, as you go through high school, you begin to wonder what you want to do, and I grew up. I think it's important to put that into context. I grew up in the northeast coast of England, in a small former mining village. There was no mining left. There was a lot of factories in the northeast of England, and I really didn't know what I wanted to do as I was in my final years of high school. But I had a great chemistry teacher, Mr. Watson, who I still call Mr. Watson, even though I know his Christian name is Keith. Mr. Watson was an absolute genius at chemistry. And I really enjoyed his way of teaching. And there's always a few people in your life that as you go through, you connect with. He was one of them. He was the first that I really connected with. His knowledge, his insights really appealed. He was more than the book, which at high school was important really to me, that he actually had genuine insights into the discipline. And he said to us as I was approaching my senior year in high school, he said, well, you should think about university. Really? You know, I didn't really have much clue about what that was all about. And he said, yeah, no, you should do that. So I applied and then began a journey that I didn't realize that decision would really start this kind of avalanche of experience that would take us eventually to another country to live with my family. But it was Mr. Watson that put us on that path, and I headed off to university in the middle of the UK, to Leicester. Moved away from home at age 18 and did a Bachelor of Chemistry honours degree, which I really enjoyed. That then opened up other doors. And literally, it was another one of those conversations, if you can believe it, with somebody I really respected in my final year of my undergraduate degree. My supervisor for my honours project was a fellow called Professor Blandimer. And Mike, as I knew him, was just a really decent guy. Like, you know, he had all the time in the world to explain things. Didn't have many students in his lab, but I did my senior project with him. And what really surprised me is that he turned it into a publication. Now, I did a little part of it, he did a lot of it, right? But my name was on a publication. I thought, wow, that's pretty special, right? So he said, as I approached my finals, and I did quite well in my finals, he said, well, what about applying for one of these national grants to do a PhD? I said, yeah. I said, what would I have to do? He said, well, basically, you've got to get a high-quality degree and you're in. So I did. And he was my supervisor, Dr. Mike Blandimer. And he opened up the doors into a life of research in chemistry. And on I went. It was his contact in Canada that attracted me to the University of Alberta, where I did a postdoctoral fellowship. And again, it's the people you meet, Adnan, right, that really sort of put you on your path. So Mike introduced me to Lauren Hepler, Professor Lauren Hepler, who was at the University of Alberta. And he was another thermodynamicist. And Mike and I had done a lot of work in thermodynamics. And Lauren, I knew the name and really impressed with his work. So I wrote to him, is there any chance of coming out to do a postdoctoral fellowship? And he said, listen, I'm coming out to the UK to go to a conference at Oxford, but I'll come in and see you at Leicester on my way. So he came in and we spent a couple of hours together. And then he dug into his bag and he pulled out a contract. He says, would you be interested in signing that and coming out to the University of Alberta? I said, hey, that's fabulous, right? You know, a young guy. I thought, that's absolutely fantastic. So we finished up, and in December of 1987, my wife Linda and I, newly married, 1 month married Adnan at that stage, moved out to Edmonton, the University of Alberta, and began the next phase of my career with someone who turned out to be a rock star in the sort of thermodynamics world across North America. And the rest just fell into position from there, Adnan. It just moved. It got me into academia. It was through Lauren Hepler that I considered Lethbridge as my starting point as a very junior assistant professor at the age of 26 in chemistry. And it was a time of regrowth at the University of Lethbridge. And we seemed to do a lot of things, a lot of great things, and nobody ever said you can't do that. And I built up a research group, really enjoyed that, did a lot of early administrative things in my career. And life just moved on very, very nicely in Lethbridge, and the years flew by. But I became a senior administration guy when I made the transition to be the provost of the university. And I was at that for 13 years in Lethbridge. But I'd seen every phase of how that university ran, from being a junior prof, working my way through to be the president of the union for the faculty, and then into a transitionary step as an associate vice president academic, then the vice president academic after a national search. And then I took that job on for 13 years until this wonderful opportunity at StFX made itself apparent. And I thought, ooh, that's too good not to see. I'll take a good look at that. So that's how we got here. And honestly, I think when you think about my journey, it's about a few key people that I connected with, and there are others in that mix, but a few key people who really influenced me and did things with me that changed the course of my life. Whether it was their insights, their guidance, their mentorship, something rubbed off and doors opened. And, things just kind of fell into place.
It really sounds like the through line in your career has been the connections that you've built, for sure.
People.
When you recognize people who are performers in their field, who are stellar, who are the type of people you'd like to make a connection with, how do you bridge that gap between not knowing them and then working with them?
I think it's approachability. I mean, from an early stage, I never wanted to be something I'm not. Mm-hmm. I think authenticity is key to really success. I always had the piece that, don't try and fool anybody. Speak about what you know. And that has been a really good way for me to get to know people and get to know my field and do things that I would never have originally mapped out for myself. But, opportunities come, and it's through those connections that they do come. But always looking at ways in which you can help people around you. I mean, building teams, building good people around you, a few basic rules in life, always try to hire someone better than you. Always. Because you will grow with them. You've got to look for good people to be around you. And that sort of piece, I think, has really worked well for me as I've gone through my career. And I hope for the organizations I've been part of.
I couldn't agree more that the people around you have a major influence. When I first came to university and I discovered that office hours were a thing, I'm a person who firmly believes that you are the sum of the 5 people you're around. Yeah. So I make a habit of going around, seeing who's in their offices, just stopping in, saying hello, because the insights are so valuable.
Yeah.
Now, I want to get back to your journey to Alberta, but first, in
Yeah,
the
yeah.
vein of speaking about things, letting people who actually know talk about it, what does research in chemistry look like? Because to me, it's an entirely foreign world.
Yeah, it's a strange piece in that I almost tripped into it. I knew when I was an undergraduate that I didn't want to be an organic chemist. It's no disrespect to that side of the field. I just didn't enjoy making new entities in the lab. I was more of what was loosely described, and probably a bit derogatory, as a button presser and knob twister. Um, Physical chemist. I like equations. I like math. And I was always interested in how I could do an experiment and then use mathematical modeling to take it on to the next step. And so when I worked with this fellow, Mike Blandemer, Mike was a kineticist. He looked at the rates of chemical reactions in different media, mostly water, but different media, and then tried to find out factors that affected the rates of those reactions and then model them. And so the mathematics was good. The chemistry was challenging but interesting. And I married that together and I stumbled into this world that is really connected through mathematical equations, which is the whole world of thermodynamics. If you want to understand the pressure, volume, temperature, landscape of substances, you have to know that thermodynamics. It's about the rates of reactions. It's about the basic properties of systems and how then you can understand why systems do certain things under certain conditions. It's a beautiful connected sort of area of chemistry in what was called in the 1920s and 30s the high church of physical chemistry. Very mathematically bound, but key in your understanding of how systems work. So I got into that, and not long after I became a assistant prof at Lethbridge, I realized that in terms of pushing thermodynamics forward for aqueous systems, solutions in water, there was a limitation in that you really want to start to look at different pressure surfaces and temperature surfaces. It's all very easy to do, for the most part, experiments at 25 degrees C in atmospheric pressure. But some really freaky and interesting stuff happens at very high pressures and very high temperatures. How are you going to do that? Like, how are you going to measure properties in real time of things at very high pressures, like 3,000 times atmospheric, 300 degrees Celsius? How are you going to do that? So I looked around and see what people were doing, and there was some groups in Europe that were making density measurements, which is a really base property, but opens up the whole world of thermodynamics to you. If you can get densities measured well, you've got a whole host of other things you can do. There was a group in France in particular that had developed a densimeter, as you call them, to look at high temperatures and pressures. And I thought I would have a go at making one. And so I built, with the help of technicians, a machine that would measure the density of fluids up to that 3,000 atmospheres and very high temperatures, 400 degrees C. And the issue on that one is that if you construct something to measure a property, the electronics have to be able to survive at those sorts of temperatures and pressures. And you have to be able to control temperature and pressure very, very precisely. So how do you do that? So I made the decision early on that I couldn't actually measure things directly. I would have to move all the electronics outside of the instrumentation. And so I built a system in which I had, if you can imagine, a tube that I would pump fluids through, and I could control the pressure of that fluid very precisely. I could control the temperature of the environment and therefore the tube very, very precisely, because the electronics to do that could all be remotely done. But how would I look at the motion of that tube? Because in simple physics, if you look at the oscillation of a tube, it depends upon the mass. The mass of the tube depends on the mass of the fluid going through it, the density of the fluid. So I can, actually there are equations to link the oscillation period of the tube to the density of the fluid that's going through it. So how do I look at that oscillation? So it's like a guitar string, right? If I go back to that oscillation, the thicker the string, the lower the frequency of the note it plays. The thinner the string, the higher the frequency. So I engineered something where I would pass a laser beam down through glass guides that sat on either side of the tube, and I watched the tube break in and out of the light beam. All the electronics were outside, easily captured, and therefore I'm going to get precise densities. And it worked like a charm.
And so that laser sensor would be able to read the number
It just,
of
it was like a square wave. I just look at the change in the amplitude of that square wave, the oscillation period of the tube, and by simple math and known systems, gases, I could work out the precise density of the fluid going through that tube at a very precise temperature and pressure. And why that was important is that I was really interested in the amino acids, the building blocks of life, at that time. And I'd done a whole series of measurements close to ambient conditions of amino acids in water and had that published. A lot of journals across the world, but Royal Society and Canadian Journal of Chemistry. Lots of work done there. But the question was, if you went to high pressures and temperatures, simulating conditions for the origins of life, what would happen? And there'd been all sorts of models put out there that predicted what the densities would look like, and therefore the volumes of these solutions would look like under high temperature and pressure conditions. And we call those predictions semi-empirical models. We use data at close to ambient conditions to predict what will happen with good reason at high temperature and pressure. The semi-empirical models, predictions, looked at amino acids and treat them as a total neutral in water. The interesting thing about an amino acid is it's called a zwitterion. It's a charge-separated molecule. It has a positive end and a negative end. So in reality, what they'd never actually looked at is the fact it behaves more like an electrolyte than it does a neutral molecule in solution. And when I first did my experiments and I compared my results of the amino acids, high temperature and pressure, to the models, my work was completely different than what the models were predicted. Now, that's when you have a crisis of confidence in yourself, right? You go, oh, this is not good. These are well-respected models at this point.
I thought I proved this.
Listen, I built the machine. I know it works well for electrolytes. What's happening here? So I spent over a year changing the instrument, refining the instrument, making sure that I had every base covered. And then eventually I published the work for glycine, base amino acid, and put it out there. And within a few months, it was verified independently elsewhere. I think I got it right. It was that charge separation that totally blew out the models that had been used to that point were wrong. We had it dead right. So the experimental reinforced the reality, and we then built new models for the amino acids, which if you're trying to create conditions or to model conditions for how the first proteins, etc., peptides came together, you needed this information. And that was my bag. That's what I did.
So you made a tangible advancement in science.
Well, I did. In a sense. And when I look at it, I enjoyed every part of it. But the best part about it, Adnan, was that I was working with students. I had undergraduate students working with us. I had a graduate student in particular. One of the early people on that went on to be a professor at the University of Saskatchewan. As an undergraduate, he worked on a project with us on it. He was the one that helped with the vibration of the tube. And then I took on the summer student that went on to be my master's student and went on to get a PhD. He's a professor at the University of Calgary. It's all those individuals. We all collectively worked on it, and we were able to make a great progress. Do I miss that now? Yeah, I do. But in essence, why I was willing to sort of put it off to one side is that although I love the world of complex equations and experimental chemistry, I like interacting with people a lot more. And when I was going through my journey, it became quite obvious that I enjoyed trying to solve people problems. And there's nothing more satisfying than to help people. And if you can get something right for everybody's advantage, you can't please everybody all the time. Impossible. But if you can help people, that makes a lasting difference. And that's why I made the switch. Even though I would say I was probably at the top of my tree doing what I was doing.
Undoubtedly.
Well, it was a lot of fun. We were pushing papers out. It was fantastic. There comes a point where I'd done that for a lot of years. I'd had a career doing that because I started so young. I had a career doing it. It was time to challenge myself somewhere else. So that was the calling to administration.
That's exciting, and that's a great transition into where I was leading, because you just expressed so much passion. Like, it is very clear you really love what you've done. And so how have you been able to keep that passion alive in this new chapter where administration is your focus?
Because the problems are just as rich. Yeah, I'm not down at the molecular level anymore. I'm to the whole person level and to the whole organization level. And when you look at some of the issues that we face, and the need for young people to have an advantage as they go forward through education, it's very satisfying work. I come at this from a very simple, self-guided journey, in the sense that I was the first in my family ever to go to university. We had no experience, so I went in totally blind, like totally blind into post-secondary. But it didn't take me long to realize, oh, this is different. This can take you places. And you've heard me say this, I'm sure, many times when I talk about education gives you a golden key that will open many doors. I say that because that's what it did for me. There's no way I could have imagined as a young guy, my little village in the northeast coast of England, that I would have ended up as the president of a university in Canada. My grandfather would have keeled over with a heart attack if he'd heard me say that, but that's the reality, right? I mean, whoa, you can do that? Who knew, right? Who knew? But that education is a vital component of success. And I think the more young people we can offer that opportunity to, independent of where they come from, Canada's going to be a greater place. The world's going to be a better place for it, right? Because it starts something. It starts this engine of thought, this engine of wanting to give back. And I think that, the world needs that, quite honestly. So people with ideas are a real currency in the world that we live in. And supporting people with ideas, like our scientists here, or artists, or humanists, getting their ideas out there and getting people excited about thought and creative activity is what a university is all about.
So how, in your position, are you empowered to support these students? What does your day-to-day look like?
That's a very interesting question, because there isn't a day that's the same. What does a president do? First of all, I guess I'm the chief storyteller for the university. I work with my colleagues to understand what this place is all about and what it offers. I then try and sell that to everybody who will listen about, the power of a university and what it can do for you. From recruitment to government to industry to alums, keeping them engaged. It's so much. And now I find myself, because this is my 6th year as a president, I'm finding myself being the chair of the Council of Nova Scotia University Presidents. I'm the vice chair of the Atlantic Association of University Presidents. I serve on Research Nova Scotia as the vice chair of that. I'm on a lot of organizations that support the post-secondary sector. And a lot of my day is spent doing that work and making sure that as a collective now of universities, we're positioned well for the economy, for Nova Scotians, and for the Atlantic region within the greater context of universities in Canada, in which I sit on the board also of Universities Canada.
Wow.
And it's important that we do this work because, as I said, there are very few areas in life that give such a wonderful gift of opening up different worlds to people. Universities, colleges, post-secondary in general is a remarkable thing. It is one of the only times, and you've heard me say this one before, Adnan, as well, is that you start off with a blank piece of paper in front of you as you start a university, and you write your own stories. I mean, consider yourself. Coming from Calgary, doing your piece, could you ever have imagined your journey that you're having now? But you're writing it as you're going. And that journey is going to give you a key. You'll open up more doors for yourself as you go forward. And who knows where you're going to be, right? And that's part of the excitement. It's activating people. It's getting people moving, getting people thinking, getting people moving in different directions, doing good things, right? It makes a difference.
Yeah, it does make a difference. Not from Calgary, although it is a beautiful city. It is a beautiful city. But still Alberta, close enough. Speaking of Alberta, what brought you to Canada? I recognize it was with the contracts and everything, but how did you make the decision to pull the trigger?
Well, it was an unfocused time in the UK. There was a lot going on politically in terms of how the universities were being looked at by the government, and we'd gone through a series of major strikes in the UK. Conservative government really weren't sure what they were going to do with universities at that time, and they were about to go into a major reform. And I convinced myself that I had really enjoyed the university life. So what would I do as a next step? Not thinking I'd be an academic, but what would be a next step? And someone said, well, you usually go for 18 to 24 months experience as a postdoctoral fellow. Follow on your research and do that. And so, as I described, Lauren Hepler was the person I ended up with, but there were several others that I'd written to. And Linda and I, my wife, we thought, okay, well, 18, 24 months, we'll have an experience and then come back and see where it takes us. And then things happen, right? I mean, as I said, you come in, you've got that piece of paper and you're still writing your story as you're going, right? And then you meet someone who suggests something and you go, that's not a bad idea. So I did apply for that job in Lethbridge, and that was it. And then I became a Canadian citizen. And my mum used to say, when she was alive, she used to say, if I'd known you were going to spend the rest of your life in Canada, I would never let you get on that plane. I get that. Did I know? I didn't know. So how could she have known? So it's the people that you interact with, the people that you collide with, are the ones that can put you into different patterns. I wish I could say that, there was some, logic to how some of this works at times. There isn't. Serendipity plays a major role. And if you're willing to roll with that, good things can happen sometimes.
Sometimes you need to embrace adventure.
You do. Absolutely right. Have you done that yourself?
Yeah, well, I was born in Turkey originally. And so immigrating to Canada at 5 years old, I think the intent was my parents were hoping that I would stay here, which is exciting. And yeah, I mean, coming to Nova Scotia was a big adventure. I'd never been east of Lloydminster before.
Oh my goodness.
20 years old or something like that. So that's in Saskatchewan.
Yeah.
And it's been a wild ride. We're excited to go back out west.
Yeah.
But every moment here in the East has been a privilege.
So where is home for you now, Adnan?
It's about 1,400 kilometers north of Calgary. So it's called
Oh.
High Level.
Oh, at high level, yes.
Furthest north community before the territories, big forestry town. I resonate absolutely with the Brian Mulrooney sign that is the quote his father said, where the only way out of a paper mill town is through a university doors. I differ a little bit in that I'm not trying to make it out of a paper mill town per se. I'm trying to contribute more wholly.
Yeah.
You know, you get opportunities, just as you said, through education. And as a mature student, I had 3 years in the full-time workforce where I realized I'm not comfortable at this level of education. There's so much more I need to know.
Good for you.
Right. So it couldn't be truer. I want to ask about your values as a leader, because when you're sitting on all of these boards, I can only imagine the weight of the responsibility you're juggling and just the sheer scope of stakeholders. You've got people everywhere who want different things. So how do you balance, you know, the StFX student who's in that dorm over there wondering what work going on, and being on the board of universities Canada and Nova Scotia and Atlantic, you know?
I have a few basic tenets that I use in my own life as I go through, and I've had them for a lot of years. My first one is something called the mirror check, and it's about authenticity and recognizing yourself. Sometimes I take the time to look at myself in the mirror and I ask the question, do I recognize me? Do I recognize what I said there? Do I recognize what I did? And it usually comes if I'm feeling uncomfortable about singing. Singing hasn't sat well with us. And that authenticity check, that mirror check, I found has been a really good guide for me because the times when I've come away troubled, I've usually gone back on myself and said, I want to reconsider that. I want to look at that again. But I think being true to yourself and your own values is very important, but taking the time to reflect on that is a really important piece. Another one that I have, maybe it goes with the story I've described, is that don't put barriers on yourself. You know, years ago when I was a junior assistant prof and went through prof of chemistry, I used to get really uptight by students who would say, well, what does it take to get a C in this course? That used to drive me insane. Like, don't be looking at the C, look at the A. You know, don't limit yourself. You know, that's thing in there for yourself. But I think it goes beyond courses and that. It's about not artificially bounding yourself and thinking that you're limited in your abilities. When you find things that interest you, don't set boundaries. Don't set boundaries on yourself. The third one is just saying, like, from being a small boy, was celebrate the success of others. It's really important that you celebrate other people's success. You can never get to the point, I believe, where it's all about you. If it's all about you, you'd fail the mirror check, first of all. But it's important to realize that the only way I can do what I do is to have good people who work really, really hard and have successes to help this whole place move up. You don't do anything by yourself. So celebrating the success of others is, I would say, a critical underpinning in anything that you do. Very rarely do you get to do anything of consequence by yourself. You're relying on other people to help you to move through, and you have to recognize them. I always used to have the thing: if I wrote a manuscript or a paper for publication, it would have every student on it that touched that project. It wasn't just about Andy Hakin. It was about the people who were there with me doing that work. And I think that's a really important piece.
I aspire to serve the community one day. I aspire to take up responsibility for the people I love and for the people who live where I am, anywhere it's possible. So what sort of advice would you have for me in terms of being a servant leader?
I think being true to yourself is the other piece. And this may sound a little strange, but your community will recognize you for who you are and will put that trust in you. You know, it's funny when you go through these things, you never can imagine the next step, but it's others that sort of surround you and move you in that direction. Go to the areas of where there's need. Go to the areas that you feel comfortable in. And you will sort of be true to yourself. Know what you enjoy, because when you're enjoying something, your leadership will be enhanced. Enjoy your community, enjoy the people around you. But never forget, it's usually others that shape you into where you want to be yourself, right? They can see it in you. You might not see it yourself, but they will help move you in the right direction. So being comfortable with the people around you is really important, really important.
That describes my exact experience of coming out here.
Good.
And that I didn't have any idea of just how cool this opportunity would be, how, I've built an entertainment company, the podcast, we make music. I've performed almost every venue. That's here fantastic. In Antigonish. And, what you said is exactly it. The other people recognize the passion. Mm-hmm. And it's even I never would have even imagined. I mean, this conversation right here, 4 years ago, I was in a sawmill.
Yeah, that's fantastic, isn't it?
So it's been a real blessing. Before I let you go, because I know you're a very busy guy, is there anything you'd like to say to the students? Is there any message you would like that people would appreciate hearing?
Well, thank you for that opportunity. I think I would leave with a message I start everybody's journey at StFX with. As you go through X, you're writing your story. And there are lots of avenues to explore here. Pick the ones that interest you and get everything out of this that you can. This part of your journey sets up the essential bones of your network for life. And you can keep on coming back to it and adding to it as you go forward in your careers, etc. But take the time now to get to know people. It's one of those rare moments in your life where time almost stops. I know it doesn't feel like it at the time, but those of us who've been through like that post-secondary experience recognize it is a true moment. It's not just about getting that degree, which is very important. It's about the connections, it's about the experiences that you collect along the way. And I would say to everybody who's going to start this or who's here now, put time and effort into creating that story for yourself. Put time and effort into it. It's worth it.
Thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
That does it for today's episode of Pursuit of Motion.